In today's video, we're going to be talking about non-violent communication, what it is, how to use it. There's so much to get to in this video. I'm not even going to waste time on a fancy intro. Let's jump into it. When was the last time that you said something in an argument or discussion, conversation that you regretted? For me, it happens unfortunately quite a bit. I'll say something, maybe my temper will get the best of me and something will slip out and I'll feel it as soon as I say it, I almost want to reach out and get it back. I'm like, oh man, I went too far. And you know it in your stomach. You feel in the pit of your stomach that kind of twisting when you said something or maybe when you pushed too many buttons. And that's where NVC, nonviolent communication, comes in. This has been fascinating. The reason why I got obsessed with NVC was because I realized I was lacking the tools that I needed in order to express myself. I felt like I was using a hammer for everything, whether it was a nail, whether it was a tack, whether it was something much bigger. It was just this blunt force instrument, and I wanted something that had more layers to it. So that's for me, NVC, where this really is powerful. The way that I think about this is a language for life. Because when we're taught in school, we're taught how to think, how to analyze, we're taught how to argue, but it always has this idea of winning. Debate club, there's a right and a wrong, it's binary, winner or loser. Someone takes the spoils, another person needs to be punished. And to me, NVC is about kind of finding that more messy middle ground. NVC was initially created in the late 60s by psychologist Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. Dr. Marshall Rosenberg used this to mediate conversations between race and politics. NVC has since developed and now is used for much more than just mediating groups. You can now use it in your personal life, in romantic relationships, in your friendships. For me, it's just really building a vocabulary to express myself better in a way that people actually understand. The core principles of NVC are broken down into 4 pieces: observations, feelings, needs, and requests. Observations. This is the starting piece. This is seeing an action that affects us. Then the next step is feeling. We're really locking into how does this make us feel emotionally. Third is needs. Depending on however we felt, what do we need in order to remedy that feeling? And then the request. Whatever that is, that's not a demand, that's something we'll talk about later on. How do you articulate whatever those needs and feelings are in a way that other people are actually responsive to? And I know that sounds simple. It's like, okay, Kia, yeah, so 4 steps, observations, whatever. How do we actually implement it? Let's talk about it. Observations. An easy way to remember observations is that they are different than evaluations. Observations are purely factual. They are objective, hence the name. These are facts. These are actions that happen. So often what Dr. Rosenberg points to is our ideas of what we think are observations are actually evaluations because they're laced with moral judgment. He might say, okay, tell me something about this person. He might say, she's lazy. He has a big mouth. He never gets his work done. He shows up late. It's like those are all tainted with a perspective of moral judgment. Maybe the observation is he missed his last 3 deadlines. That's an observation. Maybe she was not on time to work 4 days this week. That's an observation. Like those are different than he's lazy, et cetera, et cetera. And so being very objective about what has actually happened with either the date or the time, being specific about the observation is helpful. When you make an evaluation and you're in a disagreement with someone or a conversation, it immediately makes them combative. It says, why are you always late? Immediately, boom, I'm on the defense, compared to saying, you weren't at dinner 5 nights this last week. That's just what happened. That's the facts. And that allows you to kind of open up the conversation in a way that's less defensive and also start to make your point in a way that's actually more concrete. So this leads me to the second point, which is feelings. And this part blew my mind. This stuff is so cool because so often what I think of our feelings are actually actions. And maybe you do too. So tell me if you've done any of these things. I feel like you're ignoring me, or I feel like a failure, or I feel like I should be doing better. Like these are things that we say we feel, but you could replace feel with think, and they actually make sense. If it's a true emotion, it doesn't work that same way. You can't say, I think with the emotion, and it actually function the same way in a sentence. So things like failure, knowing better, being better, I feel like I should do better, I feel like I knew better. Those are all actually actions. Those aren't actually feelings. Here's the difference. Let's take a look at failure because this is an action that I know well. You could say, I feel like a failure, but that doesn't exactly work because failing isn't necessarily an emotion. You could say, I feel disappointed because I'm failing at practicing as much as I wanted to. So you could take the phrase, I feel like a failure, and actually switch it so that it's accurate in the way that it's feeling. So you could say, you can't say I feel like a failure, but you can say, at least with NVC, is I feel disappointed with myself that I'm not performing as well as I wanted to. I feel frustrated that I'm not practicing as much as I wanted to. And those differences are actually the real key in this, because you're able to really lock into what the feeling is. And this is the hardest part, because our feelings, like I said, the blunt instrument before, like using a hammer for attack, so often we conflate feelings just into one blob. Learning vocabulary around emotions, you really can delineate and have more of a gradient rather than happy, sad, angry, joyful. It's like you have a zillion things that you can actually describe it as. And this is what Brene Brown talks about a lot too, Atlas of the Heart. Being able to name the emotions is hugely helpful. So to start with an example, rather than saying, why haven't you been at dinner, which is automatically combative, we can run with, I feel disappointed because you haven't been to dinner any night this week. I feel this way. That's a true feeling. I feel you're feeling disappointed. Why? Because of this observation. That's the first half. Now we're going to jump into the second. Needs. This is the third part of the framework. And this is potentially the most difficult. Yes, it can be hard to name your emotions, but what's even more difficult about that is understanding what those feelings are pointing you towards. Why are you feeling them? This is really where it makes you the most vulnerable. Feelings, yes, naming a feeling is important, but then really getting to the underlying piece of that, what's the signal from the feeling, and understanding what you need and what isn't being met, this is where it really is going to take guts. Because this isn't just saying, I'm disappointed because of this. It's now letting the person know why. This is because, right? So it's not, I'm feeling disappointed because you weren't at dinner. You can't leave it at that. You need to say why. What? Okay, so because I could use a little more love right now, or because it makes me so happy when you're home and I really want more of your attention. Like, you really have to kind of expose your soul in a way. And that's what makes this, to me, the most difficult step, but also the most powerful, because rather than coming at it as an attack, you're really saying, hey, I'm vulnerable right here because I'm lacking something and I really need that from you. So to recap, we have the observation, whatever it is. We have the feeling. We have the why, because. Why is that important? And the last piece is the request, actually asking for what you want. This piece is huge because so often we make requests that aren't actually what we want. There's a piece in the book where Dr. Marshall Rosenberg gives a great example of this, where a wife says to her husband, I wish you wouldn't work so much. And then the husband goes out and joins a golf tournament. And it's like, dude, you're missing the point. And that's classic. Rather than saying, I wish, she doesn't actually, it's not that she wishes he wouldn't work so much. What she actually wants is for him to spend more time with her and the family. And so being very clear about those things is huge. When you make the request, you want it to be actionable, you want it to be specific, and you want it to be guilt-free. Because that's the difference. A demand is when somebody doesn't meet your request and then you say, I knew you didn't love me, or you do some other kind of gaslighty thing. The real key is, the reason it's a request is because it's something you're asking for. You aren't demanding it. You're saying, I wish you wouldn't work so much and spend more time with me and the kids, or whatever it is. Whatever your request is, make it actionable. So let's continue with this example. I'm feeling disappointed. Why? Because you weren't at dinner any night this week. It makes me really happy when you're home, and so I'd love some more of your attention. Would you be able to make dinner every Monday and Wednesday night from now on? That's the request. It's actionable, it's time bound. Rather than saying, I wish that you would cook dinner more often, right? These things are kind of amorphous. They're hard to really wrangle in, hard to understand. When it comes to making your request, make it specific, use action words, make it guilt-free, make it something actually easy for the person to know what it is that you really want. So that 4-part framework is how you express yourself with NVC, more or less, to really put it out there, understand what you're feeling, what your needs are, ask for requests. But that's to express yourself. There's a whole nother piece of NVC which I think is fascinating, and this is how to become a better listener. And this is one once I was going through the book, I realized I'm so guilty of being a terrible listener. A lot of times what people want is simply somebody to listen. I think this is maybe a little sexist, but I feel often as men, we come at things with a kind of fix-it mentality. That as soon as someone starts telling me a problem, I'm in there, I want to fix it. Hey, have you tried this? Have you thought about this? Did this work? Did that work? What about this? And that's not what a lot of people want. It's really having the awareness to ask, what do you want from me? Do you just want me to listen, or do you actually want advice? A lot of times people just want you to listen. So check this out. Here are a couple ways to not be a great listener, and I realized that I was guilty of most of these. Advising. I think you should. I do that all the time. One-upping. Oh, I can't believe that happened to you. Check this out. This happened to me. Not great. Educating. This one for me was a game changer because I realized I do this all the time and I need to stop. This is when I try to find silver linings for people. Something happens, I say, okay, well, what's the lesson that we can learn from this? Okay, this happened, but maybe it could turn into a great experience. A lot of times people know that. They don't want to hear that it could be a great experience. They just want you to listen. They want some empathy in the moment. Don't try to educate, fix, one up, tell your own stories. Let them speak. Ask them what they need from you. Another one that I realized for myself I do often is it's called shutting down, and it's when you almost minimize their feelings. You might say, oh, don't worry about it. Don't cheer up. Don't feel so bad. You lost your job. No sweat. We'll get it on the next one, because you're kind of diminishing whatever it is that they're feeling in the moment. Receive it empathetically. Ask them what they need and respond in kind. A lot of times people just need you there to listen. All right, just to hit y'all with a quick recap, you're going to observe, you're going to feel, going to have a need, and then you're going to express it. You don't have to get everything right from the jump. I know for myself, this is something that I'm still working through. Like steering a ship, if you can get it 2 degrees in the right direction, over time, that's going to make a huge difference. Don't feel like you have to implement all of these tools at the same time. This is just a rundown. He has some really great ideas around jackal language and giraffe language, and his ideas around communication are fascinating. I highly recommend this read. Check it out. Some super cool stuff. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, like, subscribe, smash all the buttons, and I'll check you on the next one. Peace.